Gotcha.
Welcome, gentlemen, to our seventh session, I think, of the New Economics discussion, where we're going to talk about Chapter 10, some lessons in variation. So what kind of things in here grab your attention or you think are useful to share with other people who may not be familiar with variation at all?
I think if I kick off, the first thing for me was on the opening page, aim of this chapter about the making cement. And the thing that came to my mind, well, there was variation, yeah, we know, but where were all the sources of variation coming from? The mixture measuring instruments, the strength measuring instruments, the environmental conditions, the operators, etc., etc., etc. So, you see the result and the difference in the strength, but the big question is, where are all these sources coming from? If you think of a input, process, output, not SciPot, just IPO, input, process, output, the process, were they following a standard operating procedure? And then all the inputs of natural variability there, and then all the consequences of that gives you the variation in the output. So that was the first thing that really hit home on that particular in this chapter. And I've got we'll get to it, but on the final page about Don Wheeler, I'm going to pick up on that because I had another look at Don Wheeler's book, which is The Six Sigma Practitioner's Guide to Data Analysis. You probably can't see it, but he seems to change his mind in that, talking about capability indices. So on that when we get to it.
Interesting.
No, concrete was pretty key to my employment as a construction engineer, and we used to do testing of different mixes to start off a project. You had to get to a mix that was 30 Newton or 50 Newton or something, and we used to make up perhaps half a dozen, perhaps 10 different mixes. There's slight variations on the contents, the constituents, but you still get a tremendous variation because it's aggregate interlock, and it's the heat of the cement when you put it in, and all sorts of things you just wouldn't know about. And you end up with a band of likely strength for a particular mix, and it's got to have other attributes as well, like slump, workability to you, I guess, and that sort of stuff. So it's a pretty complex thing with a sort of like a very rough answer.
Alan, did you ever
never used SPC kind of analysis, which I just I find incredible. They used to use QSUM.
Did you ever come across statistical design of experiments, particularly mixture experiments?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't at the time. No,
because a mix, without keeping it very brief, mixture experiments are specifically designed so that you can look at different combinations in percentage terms of what you're mixing together and try and find the sweet spot. And you're not inhibited by one response. You can have multiple responses. So mixture experiments is a possibility. I think you're limited to about 7 or 8 factors involved to mix, but it would be a good starting point to get to some stability level and then move forward and do something else.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that.
I think that's a really good example of a statistician and a subject matter expert working together to learn about whatever it is. You got to have the both of them, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that.
The subject matter expert needs to use his expertise and join it with somebody who fills in a gap in his expertise, which it's likely statistics, and the statistician running off on his own without any subject matter experience is going to have difficulties. He's going to have a much better outcomes if he's working with somebody who's got the subject matter expertise.
And for me, that raises another point which takes us straight back to the system of profound knowledge. If you like, the variation part is the statistical part, but also, even in my degree training back in the 70s, communication was key. We had communication theory as part of our degree program. Sadly, that degree no longer exists, and it frustrates the hell out of me, because with variation, you then link into knowledge in SOPK, but then you link into people, how do you communicate, and then you link into the systems, bringing everything together. So whatever happens, I keep going back to SOPK.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It's interesting. I know over the years, companies hand out annual surveys to try to grasp what's how the employees feel, and one of the questions they a lot of the questions they ask are, even if you got an answer to them, I don't know what the hell you'd do with the information, but they ask those things, and nearly all those surveys, one of the heavy hitters is communication problems. And management doesn't talk to subject matter experts. They decide they know that means they're not giving people enough information. So then the next year they bury them in information, and they still get a score that says they've got communication problems, because they haven't recognized the problem is the employees want to interact with the executives and talk to them.
Yeah.
And they're not getting that. No amount of data is going to fix that.
Yeah, sure thing.
Back at Jaguar, back in the day in the 90s, used to have what was called a skip level meeting, where certain employees in all levels of management were invited to spend 1 or 2 hours with the CEO, who at the time was Bill Hayden, the first Ford-appointed chairman of Jaguar Cars. And that was quite interesting, because he was a really hard-edged automotive guy, but he had some softer sides, and it was an interesting experience to be able to have that communication with him.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah, the employees think that management makes a lot of mistakes and doesn't recognize the decisions that they're making are based on their view of the world, just as the employees' decisions are based on their own view of the world. And that it's neither one of them's right or wrong. They're just coming from a different perspective, which will give you different answers.
Yeah. Yeah. So we need to draw the two together to get the common ground.
Yes.
Tim, going back to your first question, Patrick Nolan was the other comment that I had, and the notable thing there is the lack of rigor for coming up with a good solution. I mean, you don't have to get into statistics a whole lot. Do like Patrick Nolan did. Here are a couple of special causes.
Yeah, it's there are different levels you can get into, and the question's going to be: if you do a big $20,000 study, are you going to learn any more than plotting something on a sheet of paper that's very simple? There's certainly you can spend a lot of money, but you don't have to. Not much of this is hugely expensive. When you start doing designed experiments, that gets more expensive, but even so, I think there's a whole lot of simple things. I created an XMR chart generator on Excel years ago. And then when somebody sends me either generally a nasty note to the whole population or to me directly, if data is involved, I plot the data, and then I go back to them and try to help them understand that what they're complaining about is common cause variations. We need to talk about what you want to change in the system, rather than talking about what the hell's the matter with these people. And I do think Deming does a little jab at people who are resistant to looking at things like this because they think it's going to be too complicated or complex or not very understandable. He says Patrick is 11 years old and he gets it.
Yeah, it's the concept we're after.
Yeah. It's common cause versus special. What's the difference and why do you need to know? And then a way to decide which kind of variation is present.
I think that was interesting.
Carry on, Alan.
Sorry, I think that was interesting, Patrick's bit, because they talk about him being 11, and it would be a good idea to have that kind of education in school at 11, and I don't think we've made it yet.
No, not even close.
No.
When I was teaching, I complained to the math department, but it didn't do any good. I was teaching math and English. I complained to the math department that geometry shouldn't be a math class. The school should teach logic. And they should teach all about logic. And yes, geometry uses logic, deductive reasoning, but there are other kinds of reasoning that are equally important, like inductive reasoning. And understanding that and knowing the difference is far more beneficial than learning geometry.
Yeah. And also when I saw Patrick's chart, I mean, he just used his eyes, he spotted the special causes, and it was great. But I'm aware of another company, and again, I've got to remember we're being recorded, so I'm not going to name names, although I'd like to, but I'm not going to. And they recorded data week in, week out, and they just put a 10-point moving average through all the data points. And I said, why do you do that? And he said, that's the way we've always done it. I said, but you're smoothing out the sources of variation, and you can't differentiate between common cause and special cause. And then they said, wow. But again, it comes back to management, senior management, executive management, who do not understand. So if they permeate the bad methodologies, the employees are not going to improve. So you need individuals to challenge the system. And I guess in my career, that's what I did. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not, but you've got to give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah, the folks I worked with, the executives, were remarkably ignorant, and I tried to bring them along over the years and got somewhere with some of them. But whenever something went wrong, so I was in charge of cause and corrective action, so I had to help them figure out what the causes might have been and what they might want to do to overcome that. But in working with them over the years, when something goes wrong, something they don't like happens, the first thing they say is the system's broken. And I kept telling them, the system may not be broken. This may be one of the results your system is going to produce periodically. It's nothing special. This happens. This process does this. It's perfectly designed to do this. And it's hard for them to let go of the fact that they haven't designed a perfect system. And therefore, when something goes wrong, they need to distinguish between common cause and special cause. If you had what you thought was a perfect system, maybe you wouldn't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I liked in this chapter, the example he uses with the salesman, where he's got 6 or 8 salesmen, I think, I don't remember if it's 6 or 8, but as the salesman, and then the manager's thinking he's got one of these guys that he might just have to let go. So that Deming plotted the data, and when you look at the data, you can clearly see there's a group of them that are all selling about this, within a reasonable range, product A and also product B, and then there are 2 out of whack points, if you will. One of them is low on sales of product A and low on sales of product B. The other one's only low on sales of product B, I think. I don't remember. Maybe it's A, but
Right.
either way, when he's and so Deming sees that and he recognizes it as common cause, but he also has the experience and understanding to challenge whatever the special cause was, the employee, the salesman, had any control over it. And that's, just because it's a special cause doesn't mean somebody's at fault. It might have nothing to do with that somebody. Like in this case, he's asked the guy what territory that salesman one had, and the guy's answer was Camden. And Camden, I don't know what Camden's like today, but back when Deming knew about Camden, it was not a place where there was a lot of wealth floating around, not a lot of money available for salesmen to be able to actually complete sales.
Well, he said something in there about the guy in Camden should wait until the prices come down to a point where the salesman in Camden can match his competition. And I have a little bit of a problem with that. I put down, it seems like it would be a good idea to know more about Camden as a city, the sales guy, and the products they're trying to sell.
Yep.
I mean, there's a whole lot of other things that not just the prices are too high.
Yeah. It's it's again, when we look at a process, it's the variation coming in and the variation going out, and there's not a good understanding of what's going on in Camden, and without a good understanding of what's going on in Camden, trying to do business there is going to be difficult.
And in some cases, it may make sense to take a little bit of a loss or less profit in a certain area, because that area is not going to be static, right? That there's going to be potentially gentrification or whatever that may be, and that area may pay off big in the future. And if you're the seller, with the home field advantage, that could be a huge benefit.
And that would probably come out of a special cause study on that. Why is Camden different than something else? Brian Joyner once, I swear I heard him say it, that the reason you split up common cause and special cause, he said it's an efficient way to learn. In both cases, the goal is learning, and it's efficient to go to the source, sometimes go to the system, other times. I thought that was a great comment that he made on that.
Just picking up on that, Richard. Is it the same in the US like it is in, I'll say UK, maybe Europe? There's a lot of blame culture. So in that sales example, there's blame. The sales guys are not doing the job properly, rather than understanding what the issues are and then trying to rectify it. So people go straight to pointing the finger rather than trying to understand the system that created the issues they've got.
Yeah, the blame is the problem. It's not a good answer. It's not a systemic answer, I don't think. It can be, you'd have to look at that, but boy, you wouldn't want to, bet your paycheck on something like that. Who was Tim, who's the guy down in Southern California, down in the commander of the base down there that Deming was um,
Oh,
Phil
Bill?
Monroe. Phil Monroe. He
Phil, yeah.
once he once had a situation where a woman driver of a school bus let kids off on the wrong side of the street, so they had to run across the street, a very busy intersection. And Phil said that's a common cause problem. And so he went and looked at the training records and all that kind of stuff, which I think is great because he saved the person's job and things like that. But so I got a little hypothetical and I said, here's the bus where it stops every day where it's supposed to, and then here's a case where the bus stopped a block away. I said, to me, that's not a common cause. That is a special cause. Now, what you do with that, is really important. There, he didn't go into the blame. He went into, okay, how is she trained, all this sort of thing, which helped the system. But you can't call something that's a common cause just because you think that's a good term for it. And
Yeah, I discovered in working with some folks that they could get a team together that understood what had happened and had expertise to be able to come up with reasons why that might have happened. And in about 40 minutes, we can get a what happened and what the causes are and how they interacted, 40 minutes to an hour. And then the next meeting, we're spending time because at that time they demanded that you identify the root cause. And so we had all these interacting causes up on the board, and we were going through them. And every time we got somebody to think that, hey, this is the cause, somebody else would say, no, that can't be it. And we spent an hour and got nowhere on this root cause thing. And then my light bulb went on after I went back to my desk and started looking at stuff. What was happening is every time we identified a cause that I was in charge of that department, then I said, no, that's not the root. And so all these guys are trying to make sure that the root cause doesn't show up in their area. Mm-hmm. So since I was in charge, I said, we got a new rule. The new rule is there's no such thing as a root cause. Quit asking the question.
In a systems environment, what is a root cause?
Exactly. It makes no sense.
No.
What's the root cause of a fire? I don't know. You need 3 things to make a fire. Which one's the root?
Mm-hmm. I think it's always fun to ask what's the cause of the root cause?
Yes. I did in some of my briefings with the quality engineers, I did mention that there might be a root cause, the Big Bang, but everything after that's been an interaction. And there is some theory in physics that even the Big Bang was an interaction. And so if they ask you, if they just demand a root cause, just tell them the Big Bang.
I like that.
I did coach them, and they got pretty good at it. If at a meeting with the executives, when you're showing this, and they say, something about what about the root cause? The question you ask them is, do you believe we captured all the causes, or have you thought of a cause we didn't? And if the answer is, yeah, I got a cause, then you say, well, then we should get together and find out what that is and work it into this analysis. And if the answer is no, then you ask, well, which cause do you think is the root? And he can make it up or point it out or something, and if he points something out, you offer these 3 things combined to make that happen. So the root cause are these 3 things. And so a lot of their corrective action paperwork got through because they used multiple causes, but called the root cause these multiple things. And I finally got them to eliminate the idea that there was a root cause, quit spending any time on it. After you figured out what causes there are and which ones you're going to act on and how you're going to act on those causes, naming one of them a root doesn't help you at all. The purpose is insight. You've got all the insight you need. Naming one of these a root cause or a contributing cause or any other name doesn't offer any more insight. It's a waste.
Yeah, I don't know how many times it's happened where you've been in kind of a root cause meeting or whatever, at least an investigative meeting about something that's going wrong. And in those meetings, they're often very beneficial about, oh, well, we could do something here to improve this. This thing's not actually ideal. And it didn't have anything to do with, causing the problem, but it's a whole, a lot of that gets ferreted out in those meetings, and if you do them well, they kind of force you to see the system a little better.
Yeah, I found that, and what we would do is somebody would come up with a cause, and the cause could create trouble, but it didn't create this trouble. So I said, okay, so we got a board over here. We're going to put that cause over here, and we'll decide whether we need to or we want to recommend that get attacked. So it can cause problems, but it didn't act in this case, so it didn't cause this problem.
Right.
And that allowed some more investigation that was sometimes useful, sometimes didn't go anywhere, but you never know.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the chart, what is it, figure 30, because it's got the physical count when you're trying to do inventory, and then changing. They did the physical count every month or whatever the time frame was, and then the computer said one thing, and what they found in inventory was different. So they just changed the computer to match what they found in inventory and went on about their business. So they were playing. They may have had a rather stable system. Looking at the chart, it was probably stable. And then they played the funnel game of saying, we can do better than this, so we're going to make an adjustment after every drop of the funnel and where the ball rolls. So they did that. And then if you look at the chart right after it, when they got rid of the tampering, they can show a stable system with less variation than they had when they were tampering.
With no changes in the system?
Yep. The only change was how frequently you're going to count things.
Yeah.
Well, you count them the same frequency, but how many times are you going to adjust them?
Right.
There again is a good option for a statistician to come in.
Yep. I find it intriguing that in aerospace, they're certainly worried, in other companies, they're worried about measurement systems. So all of the tools that they use to do measurements have to be calibrated. And then they have to be recalibrated periodically. And what I found fascinating in watching what they do is you've got something that's been calibrated in the lab. They're using it in the field. They've been using it maybe 6 months. So it's due for calibration. And they send it back to get calibrated. And the people in quality that check to see, they're checking to see how accurate the measurement is. And no matter how accurate it is, they reset everything to 0 as if they're starting back over. So every time they send the calibrated tool in, it's been calibrated and it's operated effectively for 6 months. And when they check it on the tag in, it's still operating within the requirements, but isn't centered on the zero, so they reset it to zero. Seems to me they might be making a mistake.
That's a funnel.
Yeah, I can pick up on that because I knew of an instance where the supplier of some equipment said it had to be recalibrated every 6 months. And so I got the guys to measure a datum, which is got back to the National Physical Laboratory. So it was the specific item to measure, and there was no drift, no change. And so we said, no, this was a sales technique from the supplier company to come in and make money every 6 months. It was absolutely not necessary. If you plotted the results on your weekly, daily checks, wherever, and there's no drift or change, don't do the recalibration because it's a waste of time.
Yep. And it's an interesting thing because that calibration in a large company, there are thousands of things to calibrate, maybe 8,000 things under calibration. They have to get calibrated regularly. And when they get an outside auditor coming in, one of the first things they want to do is go over and look at calibration because there's always a few that didn't get back in time and didn't get set right. So it's easy pickings to get kicked upside the head when there's an audit.
Mm-hmm. And if the US auditors are like the British UK auditors, they always used to come in when I was running QMS saying, we've got to find something, otherwise I will be penalized when I get back to the office. So whatever it is, we've got to find something.
Yep.
Do you mean money drives some of these things?
No.
Oh, I couldn't possibly comment, Richard.
How cynical.
How many root cause meetings ever pick on the pay system of the company or the reward system, or you don't do that?
I did one in our cause network, so it's a two-dimensional thing, you know. These three things cause this thing, and this other thing cause that. So you got this big chart up there, and I had noted that somebody made a mistake, and he wasn't the normal person to do the work. And during the questioning, when I asked how this happened or what happened there and here, I got, instead of the guys that were doing the work answering my questions, I got managers answering the question,
Yeah.
which makes me nervous as hell. So I said, we're going to meet again later. And then I went to the boss and said, I'm not ready to present this because I'm suspicious I'm not getting accurate information because I'm hearing from the managers instead of the people doing the work. And he said, well, why don't you just present it the way it is and then change it later if it needs to? And I said, because if you present it this way and you change it, there's all hell to pay to try to straighten that out. I said, just not present it. It'll be late and we'll go present it later. And then I went around and talked to a few of the guys and gals alone. And I recognized this was going on, but I didn't realize how widespread it is. In every organization, they have a guy who knows what the rules and regulations are, and he knows how to walk a tightrope right along that line. And generally, he's successful, which makes the manager look successful, and he's happy with that because that's going to make him look different from the other managers who don't have this guy walking the ragged edge. And every once in a while, a guy falls off the edge. And unfortunately, a whole bunch of the time when he falls off the edge, the manager throws him under the bus. So anyway, I put the causes up where saying, hey, you pay these managers based on their performance. So managers that all have relatively the same amount of performance, there's nothing to distinguish. So each of them has this guy that goes around and makes sure he's barely inside the rules and regulations, and sometimes he slips. So that was on the chart. And none of the managers, executives disagreed with it. And none of them said, what are we doing about it?
Mm.
Good spot for a review of meritocracy.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, how about Taguchi and his loss function? I remember Deming saying in Out of the Crisis, something's terribly wrong when a part just inside the specs is deemed okay and one just outside is deemed failure, and then says the Taguchi loss function is a better view of the world.
Well, he expands that a little bit too, not just Taguchi, but a loss function.
Yes.
Mm.
It's Taguchi's concept, but you can apply it. It's applicable in a heck of a lot of places. Just look.
Yeah.
Well, it goes to your story that you just told too, where they're just outside, right? They're not shooting for any kind of.
Yeah.
So that's the perfect example.
Yeah. Yeah. That we get so enamored of repeatability that when you look at a distribution in a process, it might be a very narrow distribution and relatively close, like maybe 3/4 away from the target value to the edge of the spec. And you show them a distribution that's got most of the data points on the target, but is a wider spread. They always choose the narrow variation. So that's the one we want. We want to do it that way. Well, you're doing it that way and you're being more consistent, and your consistency is costing you a whole bunch.
Unless you can move the mean.
Yes. Yeah. When you're trying to make an improvement, first you have to get a stable process. And then if you've got a target value and you know what it is, the next question to ask is not just is it stable, not just is it within spec, how close to the target is it? And then work on moving it to the target.
Yeah, reduce variation, adjust to target, and then make any other decisions based on cost. It's what I said a couple of weeks back that so many companies focus on cost first, and then they go for the average and they ignore the variation. And I had personal experience of that with an employer. Suppliers sent some information in and they're claiming how good they were. They said, well, I want to see the raw data. And it was obviously obvious to me later that they cherry picked what values they'd measured, and then they cherry picked those. They sent in the best measurements. So he looked at the raw data of everything they'd produced, and they were way out. They were not good at all. But they were trying to confuse my senior management with some statistical things, and I called them out. So, but that's the name of the game. It's like showing, oh, we can do this. Yeah, well, don't quote me the end number. We'll come on to CPKs later. Show me how you got that. And so let me show you the raw data. And it was rubbish.
Yeah, that's more common than I believe most organizations recognize. One of the Hughes guys, I think might not have been Hughes. Somebody, when I was at a conference with ASQ folks, he was talking about a supplier, and he was getting parts from a supplier, and he was confident they were doing things right because they sent him control charts all the time, had the data on it, everything was in control. And I don't know what caused him to do it, but he ran off and measured a lot of their material. And that lot had some special causes in it and was nowhere near the target value that they wanted, although a bunch of it was in spec. So he discovered that his supplier was very happy to give him control charts, just not control charts that had anything to do with the data that he collected.
No, I've always liked the Taguchi loss function, and I particularly like the picture on figure 35, where it's discontinuous,
Yes.
and you get because yeah, they say, you know, in spec, outside spec. Well, we can scrap some parts off, or we can rework them. That's a loss. That's the whole point about it. It's a loss. And as I said earlier, we'll come on to Don Wheeler's comments about CPK endorsed by Dr. Deming. But this whole business about variation and Taguchi, circa 1960, the loss function, I only came about, I met this guy called Jim Morrison, and he published a seminal paper in 1957, which predates Taguchi, called A Study of Variability in Engineering Design. And yet his work was seen to be forgotten. And I had the pleasure of meeting him at a presentation many years later. I met him, and he was probably in his 90s then, but still active. But Jim Morrison, as is affectionately known, been forgotten about him. Not the Jim Morrison you might be thinking of. This is Stuart J. Morrison, commonly known as Jim, and but the study of variability in engineering design, and it's good, and so there we go. But Taguchi, just mentioning him, I like the loss function. What I do not like about Taguchi is the 50 plus signal to noise ratios for design of experiments, because they're a mess, and it was proven by Grove and Davis, who I both know, that his signal to noise ratios are flawed. So you're better to statistically analyze variation, then analyze what factors contribute to the average, the target, and then make decisions based on cost. And that's been one of my mantras: variation, average, cost, not the other way around, which is how British industry works. Cost, average, target, and forget variation.
Yeah, the whole specification system is designed as if the parts inside the spec limits are identical. There's no variation in them.
Yeah. And the picture, figure 34 from Bill Scherkenbeck, who I met a couple of months ago, that's a nice picture as well. That really illustrates the point. Figure 34, gadget on and gadget off.
Yeah.
It's a bit like your other one where you have the control chart, make changes, just leave it, and it's actually a better system. Still not perfect, but you can then work on how you improve it thereafter. Continual improvement.
I think you guys have been involved in sort of manufacturing kind of things when the numbers of stuff that you're making and measuring is quite large. And I'm in the bottom end of numbers from construction because, as I said before, most of our activities last about, on a project, drainage lasts 3 months, concrete lasts, I don't know, 6 months or something. But it's just about getting some data just in time to start making some sense of it when you put the last brick in.
Yeah.
So our big problem is always when you identify something that's not right, we can't hand that over to the client. We have to sort it out before we can build on top of it. So we either take it out or find some other way of dealing with whatever the problem has come. So we're forced straight into the root cause kind of problem. What are the problems, and have we got something that we should worry about? And we haven't got very much data. But our friends in the United Kingdom's ready-mix business, they worked on the basis of strength of concrete, which is one of the key things about it. It's not the only thing you have to worry about with concrete, but we'll go for strength as the one. And they used to do this analysis using Q-sum. Have you heard of Q-sum?
Yeah.
I guess it's a valid statistical technique, but from our project, in our, say, 40 Newton concrete, they were getting 10 cubes from us a week, perhaps. And then another project down the road was a 35 Newton job, and they were getting sort of 6 cubes from that. And they had this game that they used to play, modifying the likely strength. I still can't believe I'm saying this. So the modifying a 35 Newton to make it, oh, well, if that's about, I don't know, a 10% increase, we can say, for the 40 Newton one. So you got all these blooming data that just got worse and worse and worse because it's been fabricated by trying to align varied strengths of different strengths of concrete onto the same chart. And then they had a big mask, the mask that goes on the top that sort of shows you where you are.
Yeah.
It always
mask,
yeah, I just never believed it, and yet it was a valid method in the British Standard, and there wasn't much I could do about it.
I don't like QSUM charts. I use something else from a guy called, I've forgotten his name. His website is variation.com. And he's got something called change point analysis.
Right.
But what Alan's just been talking about, that seems to me like a short run SPC control chart type problem, where you're trying to you get different batches coming in small subsections, and then you want to know, and you know that the core strength you're aiming for is going to vary batch to batch, but you're really trying to understand if the variation you're getting around the target value of the batch is uniform. Not I want to say uniform, is about the same for wherever batch you're making. So you change the target for the strength, but the natural variation around what you're trying to produce remains pretty consistent. So you're looking for consistency batch to batch, but the batches themselves change from batch 1 to batch 2 to batch whatever.
Yep.
So there'd be a potential for short run SPC.
Yeah. No, I didn't discover that until I'd given up working with concrete, but but RMC Ready Mix. Sorry, they're defunct now, so we can talk about them properly. They were wedded to this system that they'd negotiated through many years through British standards. So it was written into the British standard that you had to use this bloody system, and it just seemed to make the data worse to me. Sort of, it didn't help me get the concrete that I needed at the strength and the workability and the other bits and pieces reliably. And yet every house, every structure in the UK, all the houses are built with stuff that's not tested. And the only testing we usually do was bridges and sort of special structures where we did actually test every blooming load. Well, not every load, but a quantity for every significant structure. But it wasn't very satisfactory. It was quite a minefield to drive through.
Mm-hmm.
It occurs to me that Deming, with System of Profound Knowledge, gave me the ability to look at things and find things I'm unlikely to see using any other method, and not have to be, it doesn't have to be data supported unless I've got some specific thing I need to do. So from that general view of the world, and you can apply the System of Profound Knowledge to things other than transforming your organization. And just that worldview allows so much opportunity to see things and therefore take action on them than I've seen anywhere else, even if you haven't been able to measure. I mean, Deming does make the observation that the most important figures are unknown and unknowable. So if you're hung up on how great you are at measuring stuff, that's okay to be worried about that. Might have a big impact on what's going on, but recognize that there are bigger things to be working on if you want the organization to continue out into the future and get better.
Yes, I probably got into Deming too late.
Everybody did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's important, and he says it a lot of times, right? Is the data's great, but the what does the data mean? What does it mean, right? Is it that's you got to think beyond it, right? And if you're just looking at the same data each time, and you're not analyzing what it means and how accurate it is, in addition, then what's the point, right? You're just kind of wasting time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see advertisements on television periodically, and when they make comparisons, they sometimes tell me the average, but they never tell me the standard deviation. So I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do with the fact that the average is there. But
Well, we've got the same business coming up in here, haven't we? Trade gap.
Yeah.
USA
yeah.
trade gap in the UK. Every
Yeah.
blooming time we have something announced on the news, oh, it's gone up too. Yeah, but how big was it?
Well, yeah, and that's Deming's got a chart on. I think it's the. I think it's. I think it's the. I think it's the Feds here,
Yeah,
and they're setting deciding whether they ought to intervene and change the interest rates.
yeah. Figure 32.
32, yeah, and you
Oh, that's a deficit. That was one. Yeah.
and you
Very difficult, yeah.
Yeah.
and you look at it, and in essence, they may be tampering with a stable system, which in the long run means when things dip in the economy, they're going to dip deeper. If you weren't intervening all that time, and when they jump, they're going to jump higher. So you're getting a wider range of variation in the economy by messing with it every quarter.
But you've got money men who are making money each time they manage to push. Well, ask Donald Trump. The price of gas.
Yep.
It's just to put out a statement and the market goes down or up, depending on what you're doing. And you move your investment from one side to the other and wait for it to come back up again.
Yeah, even I just finished the financials, so they're fresh in my mind in terms of a monthly financial package and writing up the notes. The hardest part about it is looking at a number, and you can compare it to last month, you can compare it to a year ago, you can put all this financial stuff that is typical, but what's meaningful is the hardest part. It really takes some thought to do it right and to make that number and that that analysis meaningful instead of just putting out the same stuff every month.
Yeah, the last week, last month, last year, blooming figures are practically useless to because you can't see how it's moving,
right?
Or what the range is.
You don't see the big picture.
Right.
Yeah, a VP that I reported to for a while used to have to give the company's quarterly report to the SEC, and in each report he's got to explain why things are different, whether they're up or down, why they're different.
Right.
And I know it's a requirement, a legal requirement, so he can't get out of it. But I had to laugh because I went back to my desk after a couple of months or a couple of quarters of seeing this and plotted the last 24 quarters and plotted an average and a standard deviation. And guess what? Everything's pretty stable.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed. So every explanation he created was a myth.
Yeah, and I have experience of that. I know of a CEO who used to beat up directors in the monthly board meeting because there'd be congratulate them for something that went the right direction and then castigate them if it went the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And again, the whole point was it was just natural variation, but he didn't understand. But he did like to openly criticize people in a public meeting.
Oh,
and we talked about arrival times and trains coming up. The meeting used to start at 8 o'clock. And if you're 1 minute past 8, for whatever reason, say there'd been a traffic incident on the highway or whatever, if you got there late, he used to lock the door and wouldn't let you in.
Mm.
So, I mean, complete bully.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a way to motivate people.
I also liked as well, I mean, Brian Joyner's comments on below that trade deficit, one necessary qualification of anyone in management is to stop asking people to explain ups and downs that come from random variation.
Yeah.
Yep.
That to me is one of the key points from this particular chapter.
Yeah, the people that are doing the work maybe don't have the ability to explain how they understand the variation, but they recognize what kind of variation they're going to get when they do certain tasks and recognize when something's out of whack very intuitively. And I find it intriguing. We can't get executives to have that same kind of an intuition.
Yeah, but the guy's doing the job. He's involved in it all the day. He can feel the tensions around him, can't he?
Yep.
Sort of.
Yep.
See, he was talking about getting a parking place at church.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he came up with a plan to get there just after these guys quit drinking coffee and come out and open up the spaces. And it sounds like he was setting up competition between parishioners.
Well, yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting way of looking at that.
Yeah, well, a parking lot could, if it's not big enough, create artificial scarcity or real scarcity, and you have to deal with that.
Yes, I was hoping that his comment about the parishioners and that was a bit tongue in cheek. Get there when the other lot are finished drinking coffee.
Exactly.
He also wrote music for church services, didn't he?
Yeah.
Did you ever play any of it?
No, I haven't. No.
It's horrible.
Yeah, I've never listened to any of his music.
He did the Star Spangled Banner so more people could sing it, but nobody would want to.
It wasn't written to sing, evidently. Well, the writing was one thing because that was poetry. Putting it to music, the melody they chose was not the best melody for.
Yeah.
Didn't Jimi Hendrix do it?
Oh, maybe. I
don't know that.
A lot of folks have done it, that's for sure, because every American sport decides to begin with the anthem.
Yeah.
I always thought it was intriguing that the Olympics always claimed to be, not political. I said, you're not political, and you raise the flags of the countries who won, and you sing their anthem. I said, what do you mean you're not political?
So I got a bit of functional question that somebody might have experience with. So, when in doing control charts, trying to distinguish common cause and special cause, is there a trick that you use if your your average is changing with time? So you have a increase over time, and you're trying to look at that increase over time, and is there just a translation that you can do and then search for special causes? Is there any kind of tricks with that anybody knows?
Yeah, it's a similar
The
problems
other,
of finance stuff, isn't it? Because you've got inflation is pushing the line up every month.
Right.
I haven't found a way around that.
the only experience I've got was going back to that's it. Variation.com. The American guy is called Wayne Taylor, and the change point analysis program is an easier thing to use rather than a QSUM chart, and that looks just for changes in average and changes in variation simultaneously, and it pinpoints to a date, a point in time when something happened. And I did use that at a major engineering company, and the thermodynamicists said, "How did you know that?" I said, "I didn't know anything." I said, the data pointed me into asking a question about these points in time, and they haven't spotted it. So that's a possibility. He's got some nice examples on his website, variation.com. And he's a consultant to the Food and Drug Administration in the US. Well, he was. I think he's still going, but it's worth having a look anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah, that is interesting. That's the other thing that always intrigues me. Well, people are always looking for tools, and there's nothing wrong with looking for tools if you understand your purpose and what you're trying to accomplish. You want to find a tool that does that better. But there's an underlying belief that tools are going to save their company.
Yeah.
Come on, guys, it's okay to have tools, but first we ought to recognize what you need to do to get the organization going where it needs to go, and whatever tools we need, we'll go grab when we need them.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the tools are analysis, and the analysis is just a start, isn't it? Sort of like,
Yeah.
And the first thing is being confident that the analysis is giving you a useful figure. The next business is, what is it telling me?
And you know, that's when you need some subject matter experts and others and communicate that you don't need that tool. You might consider this, but the other thing is keep it as simple as possible. Don't just start using tools because there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. Choose your tool very carefully and keep it as simple as possible because you're trying to win people by communicating to them, and then they get insight, and then they can do things in a different way in the future.
Yeah, go back to Patrick Nolan.
Yeah, I know a company who had an interesting competition going on, if you will. They sort of had levels of certification of how well your division or part of the company was doing. And it involved a set of tools that I guess they got from, seems like Six Sigma folks. I couldn't tell for sure, but and the competition that helped them get their certification level had to do with showing how many different tools you were able to apply.
Yeah,
that'd do it.
I'm thinking, so the whole point is to apply tools. So shouldn't the point be to make things better? Evidently not.
So I thought back further in the book, he was talking about in World 3 and World 2 with
in the index.
Yeah. No, is that the index?
I mean, appendix.
Oh, it is. I'll be darned. Are you going there today?
No, we're going to do it next week with chapter 4, profound knowledge, and with the two appendices.
Oh, okay. You know,
Yes.
everybody kind of says, he said to go to single supplier, and there are a couple of notable examples in there.
Yeah. Yeah, the single source of supply has benefits, but it also has risks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Elsewhere in the book, Deming, I'm intrigued by his ability to explain things in a way that those of us that might be a little slow at picking up on everything he's talking about, he explains it in a way that you can come across. I know purpose is a big deal, and organizations spend a lot of time thinking they're documenting their purpose, and while they get something created, it frequently doesn't seem to have anything to do with a purpose, certainly not a purpose that makes people want to get up in the morning and go deal and go into work. And it's I'm fascinated by how many people do things, and when you start to ask them about the purpose, they're lost. And I think everything starts with a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, what's the point? but and Deming shows us that the organization needs a purpose, and that people who work in the organization need to understand the purpose in order to contribute to it. And in fact, he has an example in an earlier chapter that you can't even figure out how to do a good job washing a table unless you know why you're washing the table. What are you going to use the damn table for? It's simple stuff. And I notice what happens in corporations when they start writing down their policies and procedures. They write them down, and at the time they write them, they think they know what they mean and what they're saying and what ought to be done. But after they write them down, they forget the purpose they wrote it down and start looking at the words and doing their auditing, if you will, based on the words, not on whether they're achieving the purpose. The purpose is, once they write the policy, the purpose seems to evaporate.
Yeah. Yes, the companies publish purpose and oh, can't think what the other term is, but I got involved in. I managed to wangle my way into graduate training. So when we were taking on graduates from university to join the company, I thought that's a good place to try and point out that there are things that you need to know about the business you're in. You're not just getting a job with a construction company, sort of. And I had some good results with that. Some of the guys used to come back to me and ask me questions or give us a steer on something. And I just wondered what, at the time, it made me wonder if they'd been brought in by HR and sent off to a project in the middle of nowhere. How much backup did they have? At least they come this route, there was somebody they could talk to and understand what we thought the purpose of the company was. They're all directors now.
You did a good job then.
I discovered that big organizations collect a lot of data, but when you start asking questions about why they collect the data, nobody, executives or the people collecting and studying the data, has a good answer for why they're studying that data.
Yeah, yeah. And the computer people get in the way, don't they? People sell these amazing ways of presenting stuff. A dashboard is the key word. You get some data that's quite useful, but you'd like to publish in a slightly different format to make it more useful. And what they do is go dashboard. So you can't see the wood for the trees, and all the meaning of the data has disappeared.
Yeah, the executive charts frequently back in the day that I saw when they were evaluating how well things were going, whatever 6 or 12 things they were looking at, they'd either have a green dot or a yellow dot or a red dot, which doesn't tell you much of anything.
Yeah.
First of all, it doesn't tell you why those are the 15 things you want to look at.
Yeah, and also I've been in meetings where I presented the data where we're red, amber, green, and then we're going to a higher meeting, and the senior manager in charge said, "Well, that's not red because of this." So he changed it to amber, and then they're not amber because we're going to do this in 2 weeks' time. So I'm going to make that green. So I went from a red, amber, green chart, predominantly red and amber, to a predominantly green chart with a couple of ambers that he could talk his way through.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the reason for level of management, clarifying the colors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I had a comment here just overall that studying this stuff for a long time, to me it seems like Deming's whole message is about learning. That's the key thing. When he says, why are we here? We're here to learn, have fun, and make a difference. I view system of profound knowledge as a learning model. And that's it, with a whole bunch of very clever ways of doing that. But everything comes back to learning for me.
Yeah, that's
what you learn doesn't come through system of profound knowledge. The value system doesn't come through the system of profound knowledge. It supports it, but you have to get that someplace else.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dick. In fact, my Deming 101 that I'm doing at the End-to-End Thinking Conference this weekend, I'm pushing on Deming's ideas that are, as far as I'm concerned, I'm with you. They're all about learning. You can't improve anything if you don't learn.
I was just going to say that.
You can't keep your company in business if you don't learn.
And you have to learn as a company.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't just have, what's that?
Yeah. And that's the other thing that Westerners aren't really as good at as Easterners. The idea that cooperation is a huge benefit to everybody in the company and in the organization. We have some fear that cooperation is not a good thing to be doing. What we ought to be doing is competing. That makes everything better. And it drives me crazy. I said, what? You can have competition, that's fine, but that has nothing to do with making things better. In the sports world, it seems pretty clear to me that when you got 11 people on one soccer team and 11 people on another soccer team, that if they don't cooperate, if they're competing, if the individuals on each team are competing with each other, they're not going to do well.
Yeah.
Right. It also goes to the point earlier with the supplier, it was right out of the box. It just seems like, people think that there's a finger pointing, blaming thing to be done. It's your fault. You made it out of spec. You didn't measure it right. You guys were wrong. If the two, the company and their supplier was working together and learning together, how much different would that outcome be?
Yes. Yes. Cooperation, all the things that we attribute competition to creating within people, individuals, is true. It's true of cooperation, and it's more beneficial.
Tim, I got a presentation in the afternoon on Friday. And it sounds like we're going to be reinforcing each other's message.
That's good. We'll indoctrinate them.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need a little booster shot for him.
And one of the other things with the loss function, one of the things that I want to hit upon is the loss function changes instantly. I mean, it isn't just a stable function. You're always moving, where the loss function is. My little example would be, I got a couple of little cars that are driving down the road, and how the road changes. You have to be a little better driver or move over unless another car is coming. Then you can't. So it'll be fun to see how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's back to the start of the chapter. Everything's variation.
Yeah.
Life is variation. The world is variation.
Yep.
And
And
much
it's
of
there
it's
for the learning.
unknowable.
If you can put a chart together of variation that almost tells you, it gives you a chart of your learning, of your knowledge of the subject. In that, in order to change it, you have to learn something. Deming was a good guy.
Yeah. The first, oh, I don't know. I first used PDSA in probably the early 90s, late 80s. And I was using it because I was part of the process improvement team, and we were helping people try to apply things, make things better. And it was fascinating. It took me 6 years to recognize that Deming calls it the Schuhart cycle for not just improvement, for learning and for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense, because if you don't learn something, you ain't going to be able to improve it. But I find it fascinating that for 6 years, I didn't recognize it as how we learn.
Yeah. So.
Yes, one of the problems of helping people improve their knowledge, you rapidly discover that they rapidly discover that there's so many things they don't know, and they don't really want to see you. Because every time they think they've got 3 problems, and when you go away, they've got 10. But
Yeah,
at least
that's the phenomenon that Richard Feynman offered, that the theoretical physicist is facing an ever increasing frontier of ignorance.
yeah.
Good.
Now that becoming aware of that in my career got me into identifying training courses that we could run to teach people about concrete or welding or whatever.
Yeah.
Because our guys were coming in from a job where they're working on a road or something, and then suddenly they're working on a bridge, and the requirements are completely different. And they got the same position, but they've got to learn a whole new area of work. The specifications are different, and sort of like they're reading a different part of the specification, sort of thing. So there's a sort of briefing time that when you can get hold of these guys and say, oh, well, we need to start thinking about this. What about that? What about this? What about that? To help them get into the knowledge of the subject that they're paid to provide.
Yeah, I think that's important as a leader, and Deming talks a lot about that as well. Of you can learn everything yourself and try to communicate it, but that's very limited. So as a leader, the best thing that you can do for a company or organization is to get everyone possible learning, and now it's just multiplicative.
Yeah, sharing it. I mean, that's one of the big problems in industry, I think, in general anyway, is that the senior management is mobile.
Yes.
They've just joined your company.
Yes.
In construction, we used to get it because you start a bridge in 100 miles away from where you are now, and then suddenly you've got a whole new team, and you don't know which of these guys know what they're doing, and which have just got the job.
Yeah, I'm aware of another. I know it's a US company, and performance reviews come round every fall, and guys get promotions, where they get promotion from Department A to Department B, where they have no knowledge at all of what goes on in Department B. And again, I'm not going to name the company, but I know exactly who they are. And I always thought, that's really strange. Surely, if you're good in your department, your division, you've got lots of knowledge which you can pass on to others. But if you jump ship and go to a completely different functional area, your knowledge now is wasted. I mean, they're promoting on their managerial capabilities, but that's not what it's all about. It's about sharing knowledge and information to improve what you do inside your division, and then your division can help another division by collaborating. But no, they were jumping ship, so I never understood that.
Yes, collaboration is what people did during World War II that was nasty for the French.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I
Thank
think
you.
we're coming to a close. Next week, we'll look at Chapter 4 again, which is System of Profound Knowledge, and then the 2 appendices.
Yep.
I can't. Is it just A and B? I forget the titles of the appendices.
So,
Purchase and supplies.
Appendix. Yeah, they're not numbered, so
Yeah.
it's the appendix of continuing purchase of supplies and services.
you're not going to go into chapter 11?
No, I wasn't. You're welcome to read it and look at it. It's
that might be one to actually to review at some point in the future. Because,
yeah, maybe.
Because there's some
into
subtleties that may not be Deming in there.
Yeah, there could be some ways to look at it and try to understand how much of it is closer to Deming and how much of it, which parts of it might be sliding away. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of this was to help us understand Deming's ideas from Deming, and what that additional chapter is somebody else's idea of what Deming's understanding is, and I'd rather stick with the original source.
But you'll get variation there, and variation is a great spot to learn.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
I agree.
maybe in 2 weeks then.
All right. Well,
Okay.
I'll end this recording, so now you can say all the nasty things you want. Stop recording.